Managing editor at gamerswithjobs.com.
And I'm Andrew Bruin. I'm news editor at gamesradar.com.
And I'm Scott Nichols. I'm a freelance writer for all sorts of sites all over.
All right, wonderful, wonderful. Okay, you guys, what are your thoughts on like press releases? Just get that out the door.
Just in general?
Yeah, like what do you like to see? Like,
Can everybody hear in the back?
More or less. A little.
Project a little bit?
Yes.
All right.
That's a good first question.
Well, my site only does long length or longish length editorials, so we get press releases and we're mostly confused as to why. Especially the ones that are, beta patch 1.07 released. It doesn't really matter to us too much. But on the other hand, it's good to know what's going on, so we'll keep that in the we will check it sometimes.
Well, I work in news every day, so press releases are pretty much a huge part of what I do, and they kind of suck. They're really terribly written by PR people who don't really know how to get somebody's attention, so it's all really bombastic, over the top BS that nobody wants to read, and actually makes you livid about not wanting to cover that product at all. But for independent developers, it's really the only shot that you have short of going out and shaking somebody's hand at a trade show or something like that. And I don't know, it's a really complicated process because you really do have only that one chance, and you really do have to make an impression with that one opportunity. I don't know. Scott, anything to add?
I also do news writing, so I deal with press releases a lot also. And I don't know, I don't think that I've had quite the negative reaction of not wanting to have anything to do with the game, but yeah, there's definitely a lot of really, press releases that are designed to trying to generate buzz without actually hitting the right notes for it. They're just using the buzzwords, but not in any meaningful context. I think that's the main thing that I find lacking in most press releases, just the context of why should we care about this game, and why is this game different from any other game that's out there. I mean, if generic military shooter 474 comes up in its press release, why is that one different? And most of the time it isn't, and so they don't have a lot to work with. But
My bit of advice for indie developers, specifically when they're writing press releases, is just don't write press releases at all.
No.
Because you're not going to win. That's the thing, is if you try to do this big news blast where you target 100 different outlets and you just have this one template that you send to each of them, it's just not going to work. There's only so many stories that a writer can cover, an entire site can cover. You can only cover maybe a couple dozen games a week or something like that. It's completely crap. I don't even know what it means, but there is a limit, and there's the supply of games out there that need to be covered greatly outpaces what we're able to cover. So if you really have something that you think is unique that can get coverage in the press, you need to go out and you need to target people specifically. You need to figure out who do you want to write that article, what site do you think it might actually have a chance of getting out. And if you try to target GameSpot or something like that, this huge, or IGDA, these huge websites with 35, 40 million viewers a month, it's not going to work. They're inundated with press releases all day long. But if you target maybe a small niche outlet like Joystick, and you have a unique game that has a chance, you might have something. You might be able to have a chance at getting somebody's ear and convincing them that your product's worth covering.
also, what you're saying on don't write press releases, have fun with it. If you're an independent developer, don't make it a PR-driven press release. Make it an informal thing, just talking. I assume that you are excited about whatever game you're trying to put out there. Show that. Actually, just genuinely get excited and show that genuine enthusiasm. And there's not enough of that in press releases, so that'll get attention.
It's one thing, as being an editor for a decade, I have to tell anybody who's new to writing, nobody's new to writing because we've been writing since we were children, but people get caught up in this sort of new voice that they try to speak in when they're writing. And if you stop and ask them, what are you trying to say in this? They'll say, like, we have this really neat mechanic that we want you to see, and it wasn't anywhere in those paragraphs. Say what it is you want to say. Tell somebody else out loud what it is that you're excited about, and then write that down, and then send it in an email to us, because that's what we care about. Help us find what's interesting and fun, and what you're interested in and think is fun about.
That's I think the number one key point that you brought up there. You need to figure out what the story is before you should know what the story is going to be before it goes up on the site. Don't send a press release that says, here's my game. Because there's so much work that goes into figuring out what the story is. When you just say, here's my game, you have to look at the game, you have to investigate what its features are, what does it bring that's new to the table, you have to look into who you guys are as the developers, what have you guys done in the past, where is the angle of that? If you're going to bring something to a writer or a journalist, you have to know that already and give them a story that they can just run with right away. If you're somebody who has experience in a major studio or something like that, you should lead with that. Like, you really need to show that this is something different. This is more than just, this is another indie game that's out there. Figure out what it is about your game that needs to be highlighted specifically.
Very good stuff here. Now, if there's any common pitfalls that you tend to see a lot, but these are all really great things to keep in mind about what to write about. What really terrible things would you really urge developers to not do, for instance? Like, steer clear of this.
In terms of their writing, in terms of
their writing.
Don't make this kind of game. No, we've got enough.
No, in terms of their writing to you about their game, like their press releases and their contacting you. Like, they email you, they send you press releases. What things could they avoid to better build relationships with you?
Don't make it hard to play your game.
Excellent point.
I've had people try to, get us to write about a game. It sounds like an exciting game. Where can I play it? Oh, you can't yet. Okay. Can I talk to you more about the game? No, we're pretty busy right now. All right. Well, let me know when you're free.
It happens. It sounds funny, but it really does happen. I've had situations where, like, I've gone up to people unsolicited. I just found the game, thought it was cool, and said I'd like to, do a story about it or something like that. I say, well, we're finishing up the work right now. I'm like, I get that, but I mean, you really want to go out there without anything? Like, even if you have this chance?
We know that preview code is different than review code. We know this. Don't be afraid to show us something that's got a few bugs on it, because we'll.
Have you ever read a glowing E3 preview? I mean, those things are all full of bugs. And,
yeah.
But on that note, also be available. Like, actually give us your information. Like, especially with indies, something that I see a lot is just not having a website, a YouTube channel, like, I don't know, a lot of people contact on Twitter also, so not having an email address to contact you back at. I mean, we want to be able to follow up. And if we can't do that we're not going to cover your game.
When the reply address is no reply at, it's not helpful.
But yeah, it really does make it really impossible to cover a game if there is nothing out there about it. If you don't have trailers up on YouTube or something like that, or at least gameplay footage of any kind, or if you don't you need to send okay, that's another thing. You need to send screenshots with an article, because every article has to have art that goes along with it. You need to have thumbnail images for the front page of the website. You need to have big banner images for when you actually load it up. And if you don't have that, it can't happen. Like, the story just functionally can't occur. So you need to make sure that you have those kind of things available.
Do you think those need to go into the press release? Like, when I was making mobile games, the press release, we always had art assets and folders like that. I'm like, I know most of the guys don't care about the press release, but that art was necessary for them.
Yeah, I mean, if you can attach them to the email, or make them available with an FTP site, or just have them up online. We can Google search and find these images really quickly. If they're out there, they'll show up. So it's not super critical that you throw them in our face immediately and be like, "This is what it looks like." But if they're out there, they'll be findable.
In terms of media, do you think it's important that they have video clips or any other types of things to show you?
Video clips are great just because it shows that you're not full of crap about your game. Like, you know what I mean? When you hear from a lot of developers, you can hear something and you'd be like, that sounds really neat, but I'm not sure if I trust you to be telling me the truth about your game. You know what I mean?
Especially when we're talking about things like graphics.
Right. And so if you can go and see it with your own eyes and be like, okay, I can see that this is interesting. Now, it's much easier to commit to writing an article about it when you're not going to like, you know for sure that you're not going to look like a fool when it goes up and it turns out the game's terrible.
And also with a lot of the press releases that don't describe the game as well, the gameplay footage is really valuable for that, where we can actually see it. If the press release does an okay job of grabbing attention but doesn't follow through with the actual information about the game, we can look at the trailer and see how the game plays and extrapolate it from there so that we actually have something to write about it.
That makes sense too. Now, I know a lot of games have like preview releases and press releases. How early should the developers start contacting you about their game? Is there a point that you feel is just too early and you don't want to see it yet? Or an ideal place? Like you talk about
Personal opinion, I mean, I couldn't tell you for sure about this because I haven't looked at like what have been successful campaigns for indie developers, but I would say that you probably should wait until you can not give me a copy of the game, but like until I can play something readily available, or until you've got it out there and available for download, because and much has been written about this before, where you're not even sure if you want press before the game even comes out, because you're not going to get more than a couple stories out of it if you're a true, really unknown independent developer. So what's the point if the person who's reading it can't even get the game? So my personal thoughts is that you should probably wait until the game's ready to be released and then start once it's actually available. I mean, it helps because if you publish a story on it, you can actually throw in a link in the article to this place where you can buy it. So it's actually much more valuable coverage, I think, if you can send people directly to the page where they can pay you money.
Similar, I was going to say about a week, maybe. I mean, not exact science, but something just to get something out there before, so that, and then follow up when it's actually out, so that hopefully you can get at least those 2 articles out there, one to lead up to build interest and one to actually when it's out with the link so that people can actually buy it from the article.
That's a good point too, actually, that it's probably not a good idea, now that I think of it, to just jump out and say like, my game's out, go get it. Maybe it's probably a good idea to at least send out something and familiarize people with the fact that your game is coming out soon, and be like, okay, now it's out, let's talk.
Even if people don't actually cover the first press release, just they might have actually read it so that when it comes out, they're like, oh yeah, I remember that game, and even if they didn't cover it the first time, they'll cover it when it comes out. So
at least give people enough time to play it and spend some real time with your game. And don't assume that you can, don't try to give us a game 3 years out and assume that you're going to be the next Fez or Braid, because I think those stories like that are mostly built on, I think, the credibility people lend the individual developer, and unless you're speaking in front of GDC and drawing huge crowds, I don't think it's going to work out as well for you.
So we talked a little bit about reviews and so forth. What about interviews? What sorts of things intrigue you enough to reach out and want to do an interview if you consider it?
It's going to be very, very rare. I almost say that's probably never going to happen because interviews are insanely unpopular with readers. Nobody clicks on that. As far as like lightening up and brightening up a story with quotes from you guys or whatever, that's good. I mean, that's like what you said about being available when you send out that press release. Be prepared to talk to anybody on any site. It doesn't have to be IGN. It can be a smaller independent site.
I think you said that about being available.
Was it? I thought it was you.
He's a nice guy. I can take the credit from you.
So if there's anything that you feel is wrong with game development at this point, what would that be? Like what sorts of things stick out to you? Like, wow, I really want to distance myself from that.
Not sure what you mean.
about the practice of like certain practices in the field. Like we talked about things that you don't want to see people do in terms of reviews and press releases. Beyond that, in the actual practice of making games.
Don't be so bad that there's going to be a something spouse blog about you. Treat your employees like people you can. Sometimes.
Sometimes.
Or just pay them all. Yeah, that's cool too. Okay, at all.
I mean, we like games. That's sort of why we write about games. And there are things that we kind of get tired of sometimes, but I think everybody gets tired of those things in terms of schemes and tropes that show up in games. But beyond that, like, trying to be a jerk.
Always good. Well, if you guys don't have anything else to add, I think we'll actually open up.
Heather, could I?
Of course.
All right, guys. So what I'm interested in is hearing kind of your stories and how you got. And I know you probably went over some of this briefly
Yeah.
at the outset, but why did you become game journalists?
Sure, we all have an answer, so we can start.
What inspires you? Why did you start doing this in the first place?
For a pretentious English major. I'm still pretentious.
That's a part of what went into it, but it seems like you have, there's got to be something there that it makes you want to do what you do. A game that you played, a review that you read by somebody that you said you could do it better, or that you really enjoyed.
Take a little bit to think about that. So pretentious.
Maybe that's it. Maybe that's it.
I actually still remember the moment where I kind of fell in love with game journalism, and it was the July issue of Xbox Nation magazine, and a preview of Fable written by Greg Orlando, and it was the most over bombastic crap article that I understand now that it was terrible because none of it was true. Part of that's Peter Malick's fault, but it really inspired my imagination as far as what was possible through the medium of gaming, and it was sort of a crystallizing moment where I understood what role the writer played in all of that, in making people excited about video games as a medium and about this game in particular, and transforming the way that I could think about video games in general.
I wanted to be on your guys' side, game development at first, and then I started trying to do programming and learned that I couldn't do that. So
I've been where you were at.
So I just was really interested in like new gameplay ideas and all sorts of innovation and stuff. So I took my pretentious English degree and decided to write about analyzing that stuff instead of actually making it, and found I was having more fun writing about all sorts of new gameplay elements than I was thinking of them myself. So just kept going with that, and here I am.
Do you consider yourself like a writer first, or gamer, or do those two things kind of coincide at this point?
Yeah, they're kind of the same thing now.
Yeah. All right.
I got your answers now.
Oh, good.
Well, first off, I think I actually enjoy thinking and talking about games more than I like playing them half the time. Like, reading about EVE Online is vastly more fun than playing EVE Online because there's a lot of really interesting stuff there. Basically, all that's achievement. But I'm also kind of this. I tried getting away from academia for a time, and now I'm back halfway through a master's degree, looking at games and digital rhetorics and interactive storytelling, things like that. Because I'm just a nerd. I'm just a super huge nerd.
So, like, are your goals when you guys are writing pieces to convey your excitement about that game? When you pick something that you want to write about, what are you hoping to achieve when you write that?
Deadline.
Maybe don't have a specific agenda, but I mean, I would assume every piece you pick up for a reason, and you want to convey a certain theme to the person you're reading. And there's got to be some overarching theme that you would have in every article you want to write.
Usually when I start writing an article, it's just because something in that idea just sort of struck me, and I just sort of start doing it until it's done. And it's just something that happens. It's like this bodily function that just sort of, I don't know, like I remember during GDC, I took around myself and getting just depressed that everybody was at GDC and I wasn't. I just sat down and I just wrote this article. I just researched and wrote this article, did like 25 interviews. Most of them were useless because I was wasting time anyways. But it was just sort of, like I wasn't playing games, I wasn't watching TV or anything like that. It was just sort of this thing that had to be done that I couldn't like rest until it was finished.
Yeah.
And it's just sort of I don't know if I could describe an agenda, just sort of a thing that happens that needs to be done when it arises, when I get an idea that needs to come out, I guess.
Huh.
It depends. I guess ideally, I'd like to try and convey the experience of playing the game through writing about it, which, I mean, the theme is different than for every game. Like when I wrote a review of Fez, that's a very different type of experience that I'm trying to convey than writing a review of Final Fantasy. I mean, so try and I don't know, I'm a big fan of form matching functions, so I want to try and, this is where my pretentious Englishy part comes out, where I want to have like the sentence structure match the pacing of the game and all sorts of stuff like that. So.
Do you guys ever feel like you're trying to say like, hey, I want you to like this game that I also like? Is that something you're ever trying to come across doing, or are you just straight up writing an objective view on what you're playing?
I don't know if it's necessarily always I want you to like this game that I like, but I want you to find this game interesting and notice it for X, Y, and Z reasons that I found interesting while I was playing it.
I'm always pushing either interesting or important, sometimes a mix. So it's even a personal experience playing a game can be interesting and important in terms of how we think about games or about ourselves as gamers or anything like that. So yeah, one of those. Fun can be as part of the experience, but that's not really the question.
Do you have anything to add?
I'm not sure. It's an interesting question. Obviously, I'm in this industry. I do a lot of critique and things like that. So I am interested in interesting and unique and things like that. But a lot of times, I just feel like games just strike you, and there's not a lot you can do about it. You can find a game really interesting. Like I find Skyrim really interesting, but I don't really enjoy it. Like Red Faction Guerrilla blows my mind. I mean, it's not an interesting game at all, but it's just the most amazing thing for me, and I feel like there's something, I don't even know if I could convey it to somebody if I wanted to, just because there's just something about it inside each person that makes you attach yourself to specific games. Like some people just play Drop 7 for weeks and weeks and things like that. And I don't know if there's any explaining why, just something about the form of it inside, some ghost in the code that makes you fall in love with it. I don't know.
Kind of along those lines, what criteria do you use to pick a game to review?
We generally do not. Generally, it's not exactly a formula, but our editors know what games are going to pick up traffic as far as page views and things like that, and then they assign out, and it's a mad grab to see if you can get them on to review it. I mean, a lot of times most of the time they'll pick someone who is interested in that genre and things like that, but most of the time it's driven purely, reviews anyway, they're driven purely by page views and things like that.
So do you guys all feel that mostly it's an editor-driven thing, or do you actually get to choose like specific games more often? Like, which way do you think?
90% of the time, I'm sending a list of games that I'm interested in to editors and hoping that they assign one of those to me. Sometimes, if I've talked to the developer ahead of time and know that I can secure a review copy or review code on my own, I'll approach an editor with that saying, I already know that I can get this so that I can have the review done early. So sometimes I'll do that, but that's rare?
I mean, speaking as an editor, I guess we know what's out there, especially on the big name stuff. We know we need to hit that, and if people come forward, like I have sort of a stable of writers, and some of them will come to me and say, I really want to write about this game, but other ones say, like, I just need you to give me a game to play and write about. So I'll do that. And I'll try to fit to what they're doing. But on the occasion when there's a question about, like, we're going to have extra space in the schedule, we can write about something a little bit more fun or a little bit deeper or more sort of personally interesting in some way, then it feels a little bit like going through like a giant stack of resumes. You're almost looking for an excuse not to look at something. So, spell check.
Question?
Yeah. I didn't mean to interject with my questions too. Heather, I know you wanted to open it up. I don't know if...
Yeah, actually, we can open up to Q&A then.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, sounds like a good idea. Yeah. Over here?
No, you're fine.
In the case in which, like, you want to review a specific game or write about a specific game and you aren't allowed to, do you find outlets for that otherwhere, like other places? Do you go and write on your personal blog about it? Or do you find yourself more interested in just writing in general and you don't really, it's not as big a deal what game is about?
I think most of us who do this full time have at least one blog or something on the side or indie site on the side where we can go and do the things that we want to be doing, that we don't have to worry about the money for it. And the things that we'll do after work hours. So if somebody, I think that's one of the reasons why it's important to just sort of canvas and get to know people and make a specific reaction with one writer or one journalist, because they may not be able to do that for their actual day job, but a lot of times, like, I'll pitch something at Ars Technica or on my personal blog and things like that, and you can still end up getting press even if that person doesn't, if you make a reaction with that person, make a connection.
Do you feel it's more influential if you're actually seeing these people, like, out and about and at industry things, or do you respond equally to just receiving emails and that sort of correspondence?
I think the best middle ground is Twitter. Twitter is God's gift to you guys. I mean, it's if you're not on Twitter and you want press, you need to get on Twitter and just, I mean, don't like stalk people or anything like that, but like find out who these writers are that you might be able to work with, and just sort of follow them, find out what they're interested in, and talk to them. If I'm 10 times more likely to cover a game from a developer who I talk to and who I think is a cool guy, just because that's going to be more on my radar when it comes into my inbox.
And on that,
Guy being genderless.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
and on that note, it's much easier to get one of the big shot writer editors in the industry, like an IGN or GameSpot, to tweet a trailer than it is to get them to write an article. And a tweet is worth 1,000 press releases. I mean, maybe not 1,000, but
that's true. Because I mean, if you get an editor who has 5,000 followers, that's probably 600 actual real non-spam bot people who are gonna
and then another 40
who are actually gonna see that rather than your 1 in 100.
And then another 50 of those are other writers who might see that, and they might be interested from that trailer, and they might write an article even if you didn't send them your press release, and then suddenly you have a new place writing about you that you didn't even know existed.
Very important. That's great. Great point.
Anything else you wanted to add?
No, that's good.
All right. And how about you?
Me?
Yeah, you.
Okay. What about internet personalities that review games? Would that work?
I'm not sure what you mean. As far
Like
as-
Angry Joe, etc.
You're reaching out to these people? Or?
Yeah, because some of them they don't have as big as audiences like the mainstream gaming press, but they're a bit closer to their fans. So this way they probably you can feed any information to them. They probably get it out or something like that. I wonder if that's a viable.
Why not?
Yeah, a video review versus a text review. I mean, they hit different audiences in different ways, but there's no reason to treat a video blogger as terribly different than a writer.
Yeah, because I figure it's best to get like to get like guys who have get like only a few 10 to a few 100,000 hits is per someone that goes through millions, that has millions of hits and there's like so much stuff to sift through. It's like all these big games and I don't know if this is true or not. Some of these companies like they give us a little payola to give them high reviews. I think you've heard about that, right?
I've heard that firsthand. Absolutely not. I've never heard of that happening at any point in the games industry. I think
If my editors are getting paid for me to write reviews and not telling me, I'm going to be pissed.
So how much, if someone were to offer you, would you write it?
What's that?
No, I'm talking about. I'm talking about some game developer says we'll give you a lot more money if you write this puff piece about this game.
Actually, now that I think of it, iPhone sites are notorious for that. But most of the bigger iPhone sites, you won't get that. But there are definitely some underground iPhone sites that are a little bit skeezy about it. They won't take your money for a good review, but they'll make you pay to review their product. And they may not even be a good review after that.
I take those ones if I get them.
But just one quick one, sorry. That is a good point, though, you're talking about is reaching somebody who may have a smaller audience and making a connection with that one specific person who may not be getting all of the attention from Activision and EA and things like that. And finding one person and really making a connection with that one person. Focusing your efforts on someone who might actually give you the
one or two of them, because even 1 to 200,000 people playing your game can still make it some decent.
Definitely.
But focus. If you're building a strategy game, go to a strategy games website because they're going to be interested in you there. You know that.
I mean, that's the main message of this is that you're going to have to do a lot of legwork. The industry is huge now, and the odds are against you, and you're going to have to do the legwork to go out and find people specifically who are going to be able to help you.
You should also know some of that. Like if you're building a certain kind of game, I'm sorry. If you're building a certain kind of game, odds are you have some idea of what the atmosphere is about those games and who's talking about those games. So go to those people.
Before we leave the topic, though, it is kind of a slippery slope, right? I mean, from a marketing effort to news. Yeah, I mean, there's a continuum of what's being done.
Back here, George. Yeah.
Could you guys talk about how, for first-time developers or first-time connections, how you might subjectively or objectively recommend them finding good quality sites? What separates good journalistic writing for you guys versus, the sort of side personal interest? People who are investing in their own sort of personal stake of opinions for the genre, whatever it might be. Like, what would be a safer bet for approaching the thousands of blogs that are out there? And how might you go through the kinds of writing that they have available? Like, what makes quality journalism?
What's good journalism?
What makes quality journalism? They teach like master's courses, master's programs.
Yeah, but you don't have to take a master's course to write about a game. So, how do you separate the junk writing essentially from the quality writing?
Trends.
The more pretentious, the better.
Honestly, one of the first things I look for is, in terms of, especially when it comes to the quicker review and news kind of writing, because people will start off their own blog as just a way of building a portfolio to show it to somebody. Don't pretend that objective journalism really exists. Like, if you don't get excited about explosions, say you don't get excited about explosions. Just own your views and go through it. Don't try to be very balanced or something. There can still be this.
So good journalism is honest, essentially. All right.
Well, I guess what I think was getting is don't fool yourself into thinking that you're some sort of paragon you're some sort of figure who's above it all, looking down on all the trends. Like, you bring your own, everything goes through a filter when it goes in your brain. So.
Certainly. And how about you?
Do you guys have any metrics on how much an article or a review of a game affects its eventual sales? Like, I mean, it's you know, from what you're saying, it sounds like it's a lot of work. You know, the odds are against you. You know, even getting noticed by the press. So an indie developer will have to spend a lot of time cultivating relationships and crafting a very, you know, press release or however they do it. Any idea how much does that affect the eventual sales of the game with the way that the market is right
means
now?
more at a smaller level.
It's what?
It means more at a smaller level. When you're talking about the AAA games, then they're all going to be a couple of Metacritic points away from each other, generally anyway. And I think it comes down to marketing a lot more at that level. But when you're talking about indie games, small games, the interesting new kinds of games, I think that's where it helps a lot because you don't have that marketing budget to do it for you.
First, I was going to say that look at games that are similar to the one that you're creating in some way, or that may attract a similar market or a similar target audience, and then look at what kind of articles have been written about them, and then kind of also look at how their sales have done if you can, or ask around and try to figure out that information. You can usually kind of ballpark it, or at least try to figure out how much you might sell. And my question is, in the independent space of development, there's like a lot of collaboration and a lot of like sharing of information and stuff like that, and we all kind of, you know, help each other out and take a look at each other's games, pre-release, give feedback. Do you see that ever happening a lot between different press outlets, different writers, or is it more of a very competitive, like we're not going to share this information, and do you think it's good one way or the other?
Yeah, I mean, there's a small amount of collaboration, but as a rule, we generally are in competition with each other, and we don't. I mean, freelancers are a lot more laid back, I think.
Yeah.
But at editorial outlets, it is to some degree of competition, and there is a lot of separation as far as who's sharing what information with everybody else.
I mean, yeah, for freelance, I have to be friends with everyone because I don't know which other freelancers are going to get hired as editors somewhere, and then I'm going to be pitching to them, and I'm friends with all the editors. So, I mean, I collaborate with everyone, sort of. I try and collaborate with developers to get the information about the games, and I collaborate with other writers, and I don't know, sometimes for reviews, I'll talk to other writers who I know are also reviewing it, and I mean, it depends on the game, but some of them, if I'm really struggling with, like, there's one thing that I just know that there's an idea that on the tip of my tongue that I can't quite come up with, I'll talk it out with another writer, and I don't know, I see a lot of collaboration among freelance writers.
Wonderful. Brian.
So let's say I have a game that's gone and I have a review already, and maybe I've been told it's good to like sit on it so you can send out like review builds and try to get reviews going on when the game launches and whatnot. Speaking as someone who's never actually done that yet, can you say to the press, hey, here's a review build, here's the release date. You know, if you're going to write a review for it, or if they've expressed interest, because I've already talked to a bunch of people that are, you know, say, oh, we want to do that. Can you say like, hey, don't put this out until this date or this time? Like, can you dictate that for them?
You can.
I mean, because there's like, I know there's like embargoes for like the big guys, but I mean, I'm an Indian, you know, it's like, please don't do it early.
You can, but you run a very serious risk of looking self-important and looking like this. I don't know. Did you know what I mean? It's like if a tiny game that would love to just have any press at all says, but no, you're going to have my restrictions on your copy.
Because it makes sense, but we don't like being embargoed. We bristle under that, and we'll respect it if we have to. But
so I mean, it would be better than to give them less time or give it to them after it's already out. Or would it be better to give them a whole, you know, week or two to have time to write it on their own?
I would give people time, spare time, but at a certain, I would give people like a week or two, give it to them in advance, but I wouldn't gamble with the embargo thing because any stone that you put in their path might be the only thing that they need to say, no, I'm not going to cover this. You know, when you're dealing with a shot in the dark kind of situation where you you may not get that coverage that you're after. I think you need to make it as open as possible to make sure that they have every opportunity to do it, to not be put off in any way.
I can imagine a scenario where the only spot on the editorial calendar is the day before that you really want us to start talking about something, and I'm going to say, you know, either we just blow you off and don't write about it, or we blow you off and write about it early. Either way, we end up probably hurting the relationship, and nobody really wants that.
What is the time frame that you, like how, when you get a game, how long does it take until the review is written and it's published?
Roughly a week.
Be a good
Generally
time
a week?
Yeah.
Okay.
Unless it's like a massive Skyrim or something.
Okay.
Yeah, but you do need to be prepared for the possibility that it could get put on the back burner for a while and it may not come out right when you want it to come out and things like that. It's going to be sloppy. There's really no way around that, I think.
So I think it's better to like give like a sort of a 2-week, 3-week buffer just to make up for a.
Honestly, I think the 1 week sounds good because the majority, if someone's going to cover it, the majority of them will come out in about a week. And you might get some stragglers that come out the week afterwards, which is not a terrible thing to have continued coverage, not have it all land on the exact same day.
Keeps it fresh in our minds and gives us enough time to play it.
How about over here?
On a side note, along with that question, I always gave a week and a half, and it always worked out for me. So, knock on some wood or something. Yeah, it is the 10-day rule. Because I need to give you guys 3 extra days to check your inbox and finally get to my email. Usually I send about 8 emails before one of you responds. Yeah. But the way the industry has been changing, like personality is now part of the game. The people that actually are building the game, and especially with crowdfunding, like people invest in people. Like, oh shoot, Tim Schafer, let's throw some money at him. But like with indie guys, it's really starting to become that way as well. Everybody's a rock star. How do you guys see this changing anytime soon, where you're writing about the game and you're writing about the people that actually made the game? Because it's something I like forecasted it coming, and I figured it would have been here by now, but it's not. Where it's like, all right, Jared and Jay are making a game, and Neil, why don't we have our own Twitter personalities and stuff, and you know we've been buddy on Twitter and things, and you guys are like, cool, I'm going to write this review about your game, and part of the reason this game is cool is because these guys are cool. Like, when does that bridge sort of cross the personal relationship and the game? And
well, I think you have to build the game first. You have to build the reputation first.
Okay.
And it'll never be the other way around. You know what I mean? Did Phil Fish do anything before Fez? I'm not exactly clear on why he's doing this.
Yeah,
but
it's got a cool name.
That's one that IGDA.
Yeah, he did.
But yeah, no, I think that that just sort of comes back to finding the story, and if there's a story and who this person is, then that's going to be part of it. If there's not, if the audience is not going to, no offense, care,
right?
Then that's not going to be a part of it. It's going to get cut. So, I know. I do realize that that's unfortunate, though.
Yeah.
Certain people just get on a roll and they just can't be stopped. They could put out just about anything, and because it's them, it will generate interest. That's got to be very frustrating.
It relates to some of the crowdsourcing stuff, but I think part of it's isn't building up your personality so much as building up trust, sort of public trust. And some of that is earned and some of that is very much not earned. But I think Far Cry 2 got a lot of press because Clint Hawking has a wonderful blog. He has an amazingly good blog, and he talks in depth about games and the game's atmosphere and game's development. And everybody likes him and trusts him and says, this is a really smart guy who's making a game. And it's not a sequel to an incredibly, deep game, but it turned out to be sort of a critical darling because just of and his blog.
Yeah.
Rob.
Is there a line between game critics and game journalists, or is it the same people? And do you guys write things that aren't reviews but are games journalism?
I know what you're saying. It's a hazy line. A lot of times the guys you see who are writing the news are the same guys who write the reviews. And there's a lot of interchangeability, but there are definitely people who are specifically critics who really don't walk away from that too much. They tend to focus explicitly on reviews.
Yeah, I mean, it's a spectrum, and people sort of have their spot in the spectrum.
Yeah, and a lot of times the fact is that reviewers work, and you'll have journalists who need to make the rent, and so somebody needs a review done, and so they'll jump on it, and they know a lot about games, so it works. It's not super high quality criticism, but it serves the users at least.
All the way in the back.
What's the deal with the old no news is bad news? You know, like what happens when somebody makes a terrible game and you review it and give it a terrible review? I mean, what relationship ends up coming out of it? Do you get like hate mail, or do people stop giving you games when they feel like you're getting? Like when I see like a 2 out of 10 rating, I'm always like, why did they get their game reviewed? You know?
Sometimes it's because they can write a really funny 2 out of 10 review. I mean, that's some of my favorite writing from PC Gamer back in the 90s was the sub 30 out of 100 reviews. And sometimes that's just what is needed to sort of lighten the mood next to all these awesome 80 to 90 something reviews. But it's also true that people do feel slighted if you give them a bad review. I mean, you can get some hate mail, you can miss out on their next release. Saw something on Goodreads today of somebody being stalked and harassed because they put a bad Goodreads review up. I think it happens. I think even fans will get mad at you if you slag their game.
Do you mean at the top level as far as like AAA publishers, or do you mean at the indie level? I think there's a big difference.
Is there more leeway given to the I'm not exactly sure if they're any less fun to read when they're bad.
Yeah, I don't know. I just if it's a AAA publisher, odds are that there is pressure to review that, and there is enough buzz, there's enough marketing around it that enough people will be searching for reviews that it gets reviewed anyways, even if we know it's terrible. At the indie level, usually you can pretty much tell if a game is going to be outwardly terrible and it just won't get reviewed.
Because that'd just be neat, I think. It feels neat.
Yeah.
Like when a big company does a bad game and you call it out as a bad game, that can be funny. If a 2 guys in the basement or 2 people in the basement come out with a game and it's not that good, why drag it out and beat it up?
Right. And even if you have dedicated time to the review, if it's an indie game and it's really quite bad, you're probably just going to ditch the whole thing because it's not going to get you traffic anyways, or not much traffic. So there's no point in beating it up for no reason.
I mean, another thing that I was hearing in your question was the reaction to the review.
Yeah.
And I don't know, the example that comes to mind is, I don't know, people are familiar with Robert Boyd's Boyd games. They did Cthulhu Saves the World, and they just did the new Penny Arcade Adventures. The first 2 games that guy made were these awful, awful text adventures, and I reviewed them, and I said that they were utter shit and all sorts of stuff in my review, and he was the nicest guy, just like, what can I do to make this better? And just like, he was just the best guy in responding to that, and so I just kept reviewing his stuff, and even though the next one was just as bad, I'm like, but this guy is awesome, and if he can get it. And then the third one was Breath of Death 7, which was a parody RPG, and it was awesome, and then he started getting more attention, and I don't know, it's a lot of how you conduct yourself in response to those types of things. See a bad review as an opportunity to improve rather than as devaluing what you've done.
It's still feedback from somebody who knows how to give feedback on games. That's kind of our job, about games.
Yes.
If a game has been reviewed and it's generally garnered a lot of good reviews, do you feel pressure to also give it a good review, or are you critical of it?
I have a friend, Tom Chick, who makes a living out of, well, in terms of his video game, his whole thing is giving bad reviews to games that are otherwise really highly reviewed. And a lot of people really, really respect him for that. A lot of people get really, really mad at him too. But I think there's also, there can be pressure because there's going to be this, torrent of comments telling you that you're a stupid idiot.
Fanboys.
Well, I think there's a moment where you start to question, is like, am I a stupid idiot?
Yeah.
Do I actually just not get this? Like, maybe am I missing something completely? I think there is, for a lot of people, a certain amount of pressure. Not to change your score, but there is a moment where if you're going to submit a score that's way different from the mean, you sort of take a deep breath and jump in. And it is kind of a frightening moment because, I mean, we all read each other, so when you see somebody who just like, if you read one of your coworkers who gives a game and just misses the point completely, you're just going to be like, you jackass, what are you doing?
All the way over here. Yeah, yes, you.
Yeah. I'm wondering if, as game journalists, you have any reservations about developing personal relationships with developers, just for fear of either letting that taint your review, or there's a variety of reasons why you may or may not want to do that. I'm just wondering what you have to say about that.
Ken Levine did not attend my wedding, even though I sent him an invite. So no, I'm not afraid to make those connections, because it's a connection. It's a resource for us going forward. It helps us better understand games. It helps us hear more about games, coming up to things. And it means that we can reach out to that person if we are having a problem with review code. It's mostly a good thing for us.
And I think that any writer with half a brain deeply respects what you guys do. Yeah. I mean, there are some jackasses out there who just sort of like scoff at bad games and you're like, whatever, this guy sucks, he's terrible at his job. But I think most people really do respect what you guys do and think it's cool when you get to talk and be friends with game developers. And because there is definitely a segment of game writing that is not happy to be on this side of the fence and who wants to be making games and who wants to do that sort of things. And I think there is a lot of respect and a certain amount of envy involved. So.
Yeah, I was going to say, I feel like relationships with developers are based on respect more than just even my normal friendships, just because, I mean, there's that, I always have respect for developers, but the ones that I build a relationship with, I hope at least that they have respect for what I do too, and know that I'm going to be honest in whatever I'm writing, and that's not the question of the friendship, that's just the mutual respect. You're making the game, I'm going to be critiquing the game because those are our jobs. But at the end of the day, since we both respect each other, that we're able to stay friends even if the review isn't positive.
Yes.
It's just to know what you guys honestly think about crowdfunding. Like, it's obviously a good thing for the industry in a way, but I'm sure you get pretty bombarded by, post something about a Kickstarter, yada, yada, yada. So just interested to know what you honestly think.
I think there are a lot of fun from the journalism side of it because there are so many they're just stories. There's great stories when you get games like Republic where they made like their last $80,000 in the last 5 hours of their Kickstarter or something like that. Like, that's just fun to be a part of and to be able to cover that. Like, that's, as a news writer, someone who's in news right now, that's just like the perfect thing that can happen. And obviously it's great for the developers and for the fans. They get to be a part of it.
Yeah, interactive stories for interactive medium are pretty good.
That's a perfect way to put it, actually, the interactivity of it.
It's also, it's even just writing about Kickstarter as a platform is still something that people seem to be willing to read about. Because we don't even know where the money keeps coming from. Like the OEA thing last week, I thought the gamers had already given up all their money to all these different products. And these things are, a lot of times, it is just a compelling story that they put on the front of the Kickstarter page. They have no code to show you. They have nothing but this compelling dream, and then you get a compelling story about somebody's compelling dream getting funded, and it's easy magic for the front page.
Just happy, just generally happy.
Yeah. Except for every once in a while somebody's like the top 10 worst Kickstarters or something. Those aren't happening.
There's the other side. I don't know about you guys. I've personally grown more cynical of a lot of Kickstarter things just because there are so many popping up, and it seems like a lot are just following a trend. So it's becoming more selective about which ones, or at least I'm becoming more selective about which ones I pay closer attention to, based on which ones actually have something to show versus the ones that are just an idea that people want to do, and no guarantee that they are actually capable of doing it.
Yeah, I'm not going to encourage people to just start throwing more money at Kickstarter because there's obviously a lot of people out there who have no business plan, have no idea how much money they actually need, and they just arbitrarily chose a number and hopefully they get it. But just yesterday, the Corusora was tweeting, he's an indie guy out in Portland, but he's tweeting like, at least, do some basic math to figure out the costs of producing your game. Like, actually, like, printing it on disk or whatever it is it's going to take. Like, figure that out before you slap a number on the Kickstarter and say, this is how much we need. Because if you end up running short of that number, you're in real trouble. And a lot of angry people will be coming for you on the internet.
I'm really curious to see what's going to happen with that, because it's only a matter of time until a few of them fall apart.
Yeah.
They just run overfunded, or it's just not working when the money runs out or something like that. And I'm really curious to see whether that story just sort of dies, whether the people just go, and then it's dead, or if it actually does leak out and becomes a big deal and becomes something where it actually does ruin their reputation. I think there's a danger of that. I'm going to be really curious to see in maybe 8 months to a year, see if that starts happening.
I backed one Kickstarter a year and a half ago or something, before it got to be a big thing. They just hit like their 110th email update saying, no, we're seriously working on this, like, we promise. They got their funding, but it becomes a question of like, how long are they going to string people along before people just start getting really grumpy? I'm grumpy about the number of emails, frankly.
Did you have something to add?
Well, I was going to say that there's one of the groundbreaking, like record-breaking Kickstarter projects was for the dock. It wasn't a game. It was the iPhone dock, and the next iPhone has a different dock connector.
Yeah.
So there might be a lot of mad people.
A lot of the donors don't fully understand that they're giving this money in hopes of potentially receiving something 2 years out, and it might not be something they even want at that point.
So you perceive writing the unfortunate this Kickstarter didn't work out story, or would you distance yourself from that completely?
If it was a really big Kickstarter, I mean, if it's a small one that goes south.
If like the Tim Schafer thing didn't fall through, then yeah, people would definitely cover that, or Wasteland, or Oya, or how do you pronounce that? I don't know. I mean, if it's one of those like really big like, superstar ones that everyone seems to love, then yeah, that's going to be a big story if it falls through. But those are also the ones that are probably least likely to fall through.
Oh, yeah.
As far as that being useful for indie developers, though, do you guys have any idea how that happens? Like, how does Ouya blow up? I don't get that. I don't understand where it comes from. Because we're clearly not part of that equation. That's something that frustrates me greatly. The press comes after the phenomenon now. You have Minecraft and Daisy and Ouya. We're just reacting like, oh!
Well, no, that one, they actually they did something for a bunch of press ahead of time. I know because I wasn't part of it and I heard about it secondhand. But they like sent out press releases and stuff like a week or two ahead of their Kickstarter to a lot of really prominent press sites to get them like the exclusive story ahead of time. That's how it helped it really blow up.
But Kickstarter is great for these projects because it blends the marketing and the fundraising together. Because as you contribute, then anybody following you on Kickstarter, unless they uncheck the box, is going to get an email saying that you've contributed to that Kickstarter. And right there, there's the like button and the tweet button and all that. Like, it's all aimed at publishing the fact that you've supported this thing. And if you, especially if you're a journalist, supported this thing, then anybody following you on any of those social media outlets or following a Kickstarter is going to see that and say, this might be worth my time. And that's, I think, how it tends to propagate. It's genius.
Do you still have a question?
I was just going to say that I think the reason that the Ouya thing gained so much speed and so so quickly and before it even came out was because there was a lot of huge backers behind the scenes that a lot of people didn't really talk about at first. Like Ed Freeze brought the first Xbox to market, was one of their backers and was helping them out with like a lot of their connections and things like that. And they were also contacting people like Adam Saltzman and a lot of independent developers trying to get their backing. And it's actually pretty shady because they misquoted a lot of them, including Mojang, because they took what was actually said and took a much vaguer version of that to make it sound right.
And then put Minecraft on their dashboard in the open
It's not actually on there, and then Marcus Notch actually came out and said, like, I wouldn't really trust this because it actually runs really bad to an Android. So, yeah.
It's marketing, not journalism.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to take 1 to 2 more questions, so let's see the most awesome questions we have. All right.
What a great
All the indie-related articles you've each written, which ones, like, do you remember the most fun?
What I would say is, just from a news angle, I'm working at a deadline all day long, and it is really about making the story work well enough to get it out the door. And I don't have a lot of time to personally invest myself in the story. So if there's a story there, like just craft it into a story and push it out the door and move on. So like I couldn't tell you what I wrote today. Like if I thought about it pretty hard, I could probably think of it, but on top of my head, like it's pretty difficult. But you do a lot more critiques, so you might have you like talked about Z-Board games and stuff.
Yeah.
Like that, so you might be more.
I don't know. I mean, for me, probably the most like things I get most excited about were, I think the one that I remember getting most excited about was when I discovered Amnesia. Like before it even like they started sending out press releases or stuff for it, I saw the trailer. Or no, the one even more exciting, Insanely Twisted Shadow Planet. Because I saw that one like 3 years before it came out, and I was like, yes, this is awesome. And I was writing for a little free site that didn't pay me or anything, but when I was in college. And so every year I would just do like an annual like reminder that Insanely Twisted Shadow Planet is a thing that's going to happen at some point. And then it actually came out, and it was amazing, and I was just so excited. That was probably the most exciting indie article that I've done.
Yeah, I think the indie games that tend to get press are the games that get journalists excited. Because someone has to champion that article, because there's no search engine benefit to covering any indie game whatsoever. I mean, just on the off chance that it blows up like Minecraft or something like that. So if you have something that's exciting that you think that can really capture people's imagination, then push it on the press, try to get that sort of thing. But if you have a smaller game that doesn't do a lot of new things, that may not be the best option, and you might be wasting your time, and you might want to try other avenues besides journalism.
Or just the big big source kind of like lots and lots of indie games go through their cycle. I don't write that many games. I edit a lot of other people's writing about games. So I don't know. Read a good thing from my friend about DayZ today. Going to see a doctor on Ars Technica. It's fun.
Up all the way in the back.
Hi, yeah. So you guys mentioned that most of the majority of the stories you guys cover are like sort of editor-driven, and I just was wondering if you guys if you felt there was a place for you to, begin championing games, to bring them to an editor and say this game is really cool. I mean, do you guys have the interest in doing that, or is there a space for that, or how do you see that?
I try to do that all the time, and most of the time I either don't get a response, or they'll say that there's no room for it. Occasionally they'll say yes, but I tried. I mean, there's this game that just came out, The Real Texas, that it's this weird ass thing that I've been trying to get someone to review, and people aren't biting. So it's just a matter of I send a pitch, and then they say, well, what do you have on this other game? And I'll be like, okay, well, that's what's going to pay me.
I mean, that's one of the. I mean, there's an ebb and flow to that type of outlet, because there used to be a lot more print magazines that would run that kind of thing. seems like every time the Gamers with Jobs writer got a nice 6-page piece in there, that was the last issue. It's bad. But there are spaces for that. There are freelancers who you get paid fairly well if you can get one of those pieces sold. You just need to have a really good piece and pitch it really well before, and hopefully the magazine is still there and put it print.
Yeah, I think one of the things that is most important to understand is that there's only a certain percentage of your day that you can spend on like trying to cover something on a lark or trying to push an article like about an indie game that is not going to pay you very well. You have to just really want to do it, and that's at best 15% of your day. That's a lot, actually, probably more like 10%, 5% of your day. So it's got to be something special, something that really captures what you're interested in.
One of my favorite writers, Julian Murdoch, actually spends most of his day writing for finance industry journals to support his writing long form about games habits. Because occasionally that'll yield a good paycheck, but in the meantime he's got 2 kids to take care of.
And that's really the problem. I mean, that's where game journalism is right now. Is that most of us are getting by, but we don't have a lot of time. Even the people who have like full-time staff jobs at the top level of editorial aren't fabulously wealthy. They're mostly just trying to do their job and collect their paycheck. So I mean, going out of your way to go into your free time is difficult because even in your free time, a lot of times you're trying to do stuff that can get you paid, pay the bills, things like that.
One more? Okay, we'll do those 2. All right. How about you?
How much stock is put in games that are just well made but not particularly groundbreaking in gameplay? You're all when I was a student, they said every day, push to make something completely unique, but it's just not possible for everybody to do.
I think DayZ is a perfect example of why it's better to be groundbreaking than it is to be solid or good or technically proficient, because DayZ is broke as hell.
Yeah.
But it's so much fun, it's so unique that it gets covered and it sparks people's imaginations. But if you make a tower defense game that is perfectly competent, it just is flawless, but it's going to be kind of boring, it's not going to get written about. And that's really what it is. It needs to have a story angle.
Well, I mean, one recently, Spec Ops, gameplay-wise, it's pretty standard cover shooter, but it did really interesting things with story. So it wasn't groundbreaking in terms of how it plays.
Kirk Hamilton wouldn't show up about it.
But I guess that one still is interesting in other ways. But I don't know.
I think even that, what made Spec Ops work is because they also hit a good spot timing-wise, where they weren't going right up against another pop-out cover shooter. I think if it came out at the same time as Gears of War, 4 or 5, whatever, then it'd be a much harder time to differentiate and make people care, and maybe get people's grandma picking up around on an accident from the stores at present.
Timing is a big thing.
But I think, timing is a real big thing, especially when you got the games that aren't as unique, is figure out when games like yours are coming out and be nowhere near them. Because it could be that, there are people like Kirk Hamilton at Kotaku, he's got certain kinds of games he really likes. And if one of them has not come out for 2 months, and then you hit it right then he's going to be really happy to be playing your game.
Torchlight, perfect example.
Yeah. 10 years before the next job.
And wrapping up right there.
I was just wondering how, if any of you have tried to sell video game journalism to the mainstream press, or do you know how easy that is? Because there are occasionally New York Times stories about video games, or I don't know, things like that.
That's very foreign to me. And I've tried a few times and just been on the wall. I mean, it's a very, very difficult thing. I mean, the New York Times used to have a staff writer, and now they work with Kotaku, so they don't really accept much outside work. And CNN generally only covers something if you're willing to do it for free because you have a book coming out or something like that. So yeah, that's difficult.
it's really, really hard to get into those spots, in part because they expect you to have great mainstream journalism credentials. They expect you to have all of the networking down. They expect you a lot of times to have an advanced degree in journalism. And they're also fighting the fact that they all keep losing money. And I mean, especially a print magazine or a print newspaper, these guys are not.
So they're sticking close to home.
Yeah, they're hurting. They're not hurting for content. They're hurting for readers. Unless you can convince them to change their whole way of doing their business.
Right. I think you probably have a lot of people who are just trying to hang on right now for a few more years, keep their job, and not stick their neck out for some article, about video games that they're gonna, when the review comes out, you're like, what the hell? You paid $200 for that? Are you kidding me? So that's speculation.
They only talk about it as like some big moral controversy or something. That's why you don't.
That's side move in Mass Effect.
Yeah, that's why. That's why I don't trust it.
So, just a quick show of hands, like how many developers here? Yeah? Alright, awesome. How many aspiring games journalists?
Oh, not
Aspiring games journalists. Alright. To talk about.
You guys did such a good job of making it sound so glamorous. Our life is hard. Please make it easier for us. I think that was our angle.
Glamour shots.
Thank you all. Thank you all very much. But be sure, if you haven't already, there's a sign-in sheet in the back. We'd love to know that you were here, having a good time. So definitely hit that up. And keep an eye on our site and everything for the next event. Thanks again.